The ill health and death of Queen Anne Stuart. Anne endured persistent health challenges throughout her lifetime, with her health deteriorating notably from her 30s onwards, leading to obesity. Despite experiencing 17 pregnancies, she tragically passed away without any surviving children, marking the end of the House of Stuart's reign with her as its final monarch. Queen Anne's reign was marked by a series of health struggles that ultimately contributed to her untimely demise. Afflicted by recurring bouts of gout, she found herself crippled and reliant on mobility aids such as wheelchairs and a type of enclosed chair with poles that allow it to be carried by 2 or more bearers. Despite her efforts to maintain a semblance of activity, her inactive lifestyle led to a noticeable weight gain, further exacerbating her health concerns. In her later years, Anne's physical deterioration became increasingly pronounced, with her appearance reflecting the toll of her ailments. Tragically, her battle with illness culminated in her passing on the 1st of August 1714, leaving behind a legacy marred by the relentless torment of poor health. Anne's last pregnancy concluded tragically on the 25th of January 1700, resulting in a stillbirth. Throughout her life, she endured the sorrow of pregnancy loss and stillbirth, having been pregnant at least 17 times, spanning over a decade, and suffering over 10 miscarriages or stillborn births. Beginning around 1698, Anne grappled with recurrent episodes of gout, characterized by agonizing pains in her limbs that eventually spread to her stomach and head. Given her history of fetal loss and the manifestation of various physical symptoms, medical experts speculate that Anne might have been afflicted with systematic lupus or antiphospholipid syndrome. Alternatively, pelvic inflammatory disease could provide a plausible explanation for the onset of her symptoms, particularly as they coincided with her penultimate pregnancy. Various other factors have been proposed as potential causes of Anne's pregnancy failures, including listeriosis, diabetes, intrauterine growth retardation, and rhesus incompatibility. However, rhesus incompatibility seems less likely, as it typically worsens with subsequent pregnancies, whereas Anne's only surviving son, Prince William, Duke of Gloucester, was born after a series of stillbirths. Syphilis, porphyria, and pelvic deformity have also been considered, but are deemed improbable by experts due to inconsistencies with Anne's medical history and symptoms. Anne also battled with gout, and her battles plagued her throughout her later years, leaving her crippled for extended periods of time. Within the confines of the court, she relied on a chair with 2 poles carried by 2 or more bearers for transportation, or resorted to using a wheelchair to move around. Outside the court on her vast estates, she opted for a 1-horse chassis, which she handled with surprising vigour. The inactive lifestyle enforced by her condition took its toll on Anne's physical appearance, causing her to gain weight significantly. Sarah, Duchess of Marlborough, remarked on Anne's transformation, noting that while there remained a semblance of majesty in her appearance, it was overshadowed by a profound sense of gloominess. Sir John Clarke, 1st Baronet, provided a candid depiction of Anne's condition during a visit in 1706. He described her enduring a bout of gout, writhing in extreme pain and agony. His account painted a stark picture of the Queen, with her face bearing redness and spots, accentuated by her dishevelled attire. The affected foot was visibly distressed, wrapped in unsightly bandages. Clarke's encounter left a deep impression, highlighting the distressing reality of Anne's suffering, which resonated deeply with him. Between January and July of 1713, Anne's physical condition deteriorated significantly. The ordeal began during the Christmas season, when she fell ill with a fever and remained unconscious for an extended period of time, sparking widespread rumours of her imminent demise. Although she managed to recover from this episode, her health took another serious turn for the worse in March of the same year. By July, Anne had begun to lose confidence in her trusted advisor, Harley. According to records, she expressed her grievances to the cabinet, citing Harley's alleged neglect of duties, incomprehensible communication, unreliability, and unprofessional conduct, including instances of arriving intoxicated. Consequently, on the 27th of July 1714, amid Parliament's summer recess, she made the decision to dismiss Harley from his position as Lord Treasurer. Despite her declining health, attributed in part to the stress of governance, Anne continued to fulfill her duties, attending late-night cabinet meetings aimed at selecting Harley's successor. However, her condition worsened to the point where she was unable to attend a third crucial meeting due to her illness. On the 30th of July 1714, the anniversary of the death of her beloved son Prince William, Anne suffered a debilitating stroke, rendering her unable to speak. In response, on the advice of the Privy Council, she delegated the duties of Lord Treasurer to Charles Talbot, the first Duke of Shrewsbury. Anne passed away on the morning of the 1st of August 1714, around 7:30 a.m. Her death brought relief to some, including her physician, who saw it as a release from a life marked by poor health and personal tragedy. She was laid to rest beside her husband and children in the Henry VII Chapel on the south aisle of Westminster Abbey on the 24th of August. The funeral of Queen Anne Stuart. On the occasion of her death, the Queen left specific instructions for her funeral in her draft of will, expressing her wish to be laid to rest in the same manner and place as her late royal consort. Despite the funeral being officially classified as private, the ceremony was nonetheless a grand affair, with expenses totaling £10,579. The day before the funeral, the Queen's coffin, draped in purple, was transported from Kensington to Westminster in a funeral chariot. This chariot, notable for its large and sturdy wheels, was drawn by 8 robust horses, all adorned in purple hoods to match the sombre occasion. The coffin's journey to Westminster was a significant event, drawing the attention of many. Upon arrival at Westminster, the coffin was placed in the Prince's chamber of the Palace of Westminster, where a vigil was held in honour of the deceased monarch. The Duchess of Somerset was appointed as the chief mourner, a role of great honour and responsibility, supported by her husband and another male supporter. The Queen's lady-in-waiting and maids of honour were also present to pay their respects, along with 14 countesses who added to the solemnity and grandeur of the occasion. Each of these women was provided with 26 yards of black crape to fashion mourning veils, adhering to the traditions of the time and marking their participation in the mourning process. The actual burial took place on the evening of the 24th of August, a ceremony steeped in tradition and formality. The Queen's interment was marked by the presence of 100 yeomen of the Guard, who were on duty wearing specifically made black coats. Their presence underscored the significance of the event, as they stood as solemn witnesses to the final rites of their monarch. The service itself was conducted by Francis Atterbury, the Bishop of Rochester, who served as the Dean of Westminster. This choice of officiant was somewhat ironic, given that the Queen had particularly disliked him during her lifetime. Nevertheless, he performed his duties with the gravity and decorum befitting such an occasion. In contrast to her feelings about Atterbury, the Queen might have taken some solace in the music provided by 30 children of the Chapel Royal. These young choristers, dressed in their formal attire, lent their voices to the service, a fitting tribute to a monarch who had held music in high regard. Each child was also equipped with a new pocket handkerchief, a small but thoughtful detail that reflected the attention to ceremony and protocol that characterized the entire funeral. The funeral arrangement extended beyond the immediate royal family and close attendants. Even the Queen's household staff were considered in the preparations, though not all were provided with new mourning garments. A special mourning livery, however, was fashioned for Samuel Stubbs, the Queen's rat killer, highlighting the thoroughness with which the Queen's household was involved in the funeral proceedings. This attention to detail, extending even to the less prominent members of the household, illustrated the comprehensive nature of the funeral planning. One of the more striking aspects of the funeral was the size of the Queen's coffin. Onlookers noted that it was even larger than that of her husband, the Prince, who had been known as a very large and bulky man. The size of the coffin necessitated the involvement of 14 carpenters, all dressed in black coats and caps, to carry it. The burden was indeed a heavy one, both literally and figuratively, as these men bore the weight of the final resting place of a monarch who had reigned during a pivotal period in British history. In addition to the carpenters, 6 dukes served as pallbearers, their role more ceremonial than functional, but equally important in the overall pageantry of the event. The final resting place of the Queen was the Henry VII Chapel in Westminster Abbey, a site of deep historical and spiritual significance. As per her wishes, she was laid to rest on the right-hand side of the chapel next to her beloved husband. This placement symbolised not only their personal bond, but also the unity of their reigns, intertwined in history and now in death. The Queen's coffin was positioned close to those of her children, whose bodies lay in a nearby vault beneath the tomb of their ancestor, Mary Queen of Scots. This proximity to her family in death mirrored the importance of her lineage and the continuation of the Stuart bloodline, albeit one that would soon come to an end with her passing. The Queen's funeral, though designated as private, was an event of considerable public interest and historical importance. The detailed planning, the participation of high-ranking nobles, and the inclusion of even the lesser members of the royal household in the mourning process all reflected the significant role that the Queen had played in the nation's life. Her funeral was not just the end of an individual life, but the closing chapter of the Stuart monarchy. The heavy coffin, the vigil in the Prince's chamber, and the final interment in Westminster Abbey were all steeped in tradition, marking the end of an era. In the broader context, the Queen's funeral can be seen as a reflection of the rituals and customs that surrounded the British monarchy at the time. The emphasis on mourning attire, the involvement of various members of the court, and the careful orchestration of every detail were all part of a long-standing tradition that sought to honour the deceased, while reinforcing the continuity of the monarchy. The fact that her coffin was noted for its size and the presence of the children of the Chapel Royal, among other details, all contributed to the lasting impression of the funeral as a significant historical event. In the end, the Queen was laid to rest according to her wishes, next to her royal consort, surrounded by the symbols of her reign and her family. The final image of the Queen borne to her resting place in a purple-draped coffin, attended by the highest-ranking members of her court and her faithful servants, remains a poignant reminder of the solemnity and grandeur that characterised the end of the Stuart dynasty.